Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. Rolling through the Republican candidates for governor in Arizona, and today is a guy who served in the Congress of the United States, now an Arizona resident for, oh boy, I think it's some 15 years now, right?
12 years.
12 years.
As of July 4th.
Frank Riggs, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday.
Nice to join you, John.
Good to
Thank
see you again. Good to see you again. I did a candidate profile on you a couple of weeks ago.
You were good enough to come all the way up to our house?
Drove all the way up to, I mean, you're almost all the way to Flagstaff. He lives way north. But it was good to meet you, and I enjoyed it because you weren't what I expected.
How so?
I didn't expect some of the things I learned about you. Number one, Republican from California. He's one of three Republicans, who voted against the first Gulf War. Why did he do that?
Well, I had been a member of Congress for all of 7 days, and I went to a special briefing at the White House. This was the Friday before we commenced, basically, the offensive military action the following day. Asked President Bush, 41, if we were going to leave Saddam Hussein in power. And I'll never forget what he said, John. He said, "I have no intention of going all the way to Baghdad." Those words are seared into my mind. Of course, his son, Bush 43, would do just that many years later. But the more, I thought, important question that I asked of then Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney, then National Security Advisor Colin Powell, was what they thought the ramifications might be of our basically having a large military presence, a footprint, if you will, in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East. How long we would be there, and again, whether they felt there would be any lasting repercussions. And I really got blank stares, and I was later taken aside by senior members of my party. I was chastised for challenging the president and his senior advisors and for not towing the party line.
Who chastised you?
Well, senior Republican leaders in Congress. I really don't remember exactly who, but I was told, "Look, you're a backbencher." And I said, au contraire. I mean, honestly, we were voting on matters involving war and peace, life and death.
And you served.
And I proudly served in the United States Army. And I just didn't feel that I had gotten the facts or the compelling arguments to initiate military action then without considering what the long-term repercussions might be.
Now, the reason I bring it up is you are not a guy to just go along to get along. Am I right?
Well, yes, I'd like to believe that I put principle over politics.
Why are you running?
Because,
and why does no one give you a chance?
Well, stay tuned on the latter question. and if no one gives me a chance, they don't know my background. I've always been the dark horse and the underdog. I won election to Congress by defeating a 4-term, 8-year Democrat incumbent congressman in a congressional district where Democrats had almost a 20-point registration advantage. So I'm used to an uphill battle. And because this isn't my first rodeo, I can feel the momentum building every single day, everywhere I go. And I sense I have the wind at my back.
You had to win congressional seats in basically Napa, California. I mean, this is not
Napa
exactly...
was sort of the heart, the wine valleys of Napa.
This is not
Sonoma.
exactly a strong... This isn't Orange County, or it's not Maricopa County.
But it was a largely rural district up the California north coast to the Oregon border, and we had our traditional resource industries, especially the forest products industry, and that industry was providing most of the living wage jobs that were sustaining the economies of the rural communities that I represented, yet it was under siege from extreme environmental interests. I actually ran on a slogan in my second bid for Congress in 1994 of Jobs First, not Earth First, the radical environmental organization that had been associated with tree spikings, bombings, and later would ransack my congressional office and basically terrorize my congressional staff in 1998. Oh, yeah.
So you've been around the block.
I have been, and that is precisely why I'm running for governor, because we need an experienced, proven, strong, determined leader at the helm, because we have very real challenges.
What's the biggest challenge facing the state right now?
The most immediate challenge is the fiscal cliff that looms, because we have a projected structural budget, operating budget deficit, and we have a lot of long-term debt that we acquired during the recession when Governor Brewer and the state legislature had to resort to some pretty extraordinary means, selling off, leasing back state-owned properties, including the Capitol Office
and a
building,
1-cent tax.
The 1-cent tax, pledging future lottery revenues, which are supposed to be earmarked for K-12 education, having to do all that, those kind of one-time techniques for balancing the budget to avoid raising taxes. So that's the most immediate challenge. But right on the heels of that is the #1 responsibility of state government, which is public safety, and that has to include the state role in helping to secure our border and combat border crime.
Okay, as we're taping today, the president meeting with Governor Rick Perry in Texas. Is this just theater? Does anything come of this?
Well, I think hope springs eternal, honestly. I mean, to secure the border, which is a matter of national defense, national security, the highest priority of the federal government, and also a matter of public safety, the highest priority of state government, requires a cooperative, collaborative approach, a partnership, if you will, between federal, state, and local government. And I fully intend, as a border state governor, to spearhead that cooperative effort and to marshal the resources that we need to secure our border, the Tucson sector of our border.
And you just laid out that we are in financial straits. So how does the state now, if you were to become governor, get involved in spending money trying to secure our own border, which is really a federal job? We're going to have to pay for this? And
well,
you think we should?
It's a federal job, but we have to provide the necessary resources for the state and local law enforcement part of a combined approach to securing the border. And again, combating illegal immigration and border-related crime.
How do we pay for it?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a couple of places I'd like to start, because I've already committed to using the executive authority of the governor's office to repeal Arizona's participation in Common Core, the federally mandated.
That's on your campaign sign.
It is. But the Arizona Association of School Business Officials says it will cost over $350 million to fully implement Common Core. That's money we can't afford to spend, and certainly not for a top-down, one-size-fits-all education mandate, which restricts local control and local innovation in public education.
Back to the border, though. That's how you would try to use that money and divert it to the.
Absolutely, and I would roll back the unsustainable expansion of Medicaid by excluding those able-bodied, working-age, childless adults from being able to participate above the 100% federal poverty level. By the way, Arizona's contribution, that is to say, the state taxpayer funding for the expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare, is estimated to cost us $2.8 billion between now, 2014, and the year 2022. And I suggest to you that public safety, including securing the border, is a much higher priority.
Okay, so that instantly says that you do not agree with Governor Brewer, obviously signing on with the government to provide health care here in Arizona.
I don't. I think it was a...
What do we do? What's the alternative?
The alternative is, as we did when I served in Congress, we fundamentally reformed welfare. We called it ending welfare as we knew it by imposing time limits and work requirements on welfare recipients who, again, were working age and able-bodied. We have to exclude that population from the expanded taxpayer-funded public benefits. So what do we do now? Well, we know now that our state has a higher percentage of enrollees in Obamacare through the national exchange under the age of 18, that is to say dependent children living at or below the federal poverty level, than any other state. And conversely, we have a lower percentage in all the other age segments, including the so-called invincible millennials who were supposed to sign up in droves to make Obamacare financially feasible from an insurance underwriting standpoint. So we've got to scale back that expansion. And the other reason I want to do it, John, is because as a member of Congress, I fought a bruising battle to reform and strengthen Medicare, the retirement health insurance program, to put it on long-term sound financial footing. And I don't want Medicare to be used as a source of funding for Obamacare. Yet the Congressional Budget Office says that Obamacare will take $1 trillion from Medicare over the next decade to pay for Obamacare subsidies, including the expansion of Medicaid here in Arizona.
Let's talk about education. You said you would not support Common Core. Why not?
Because
shouldn't we have a standard nationally of how to compete against the rest of the world?
Common Core should be a voluntary set of standards that a school district or a charter school governing board could adopt. But as a federal education mandate imposed on state government, and by state government in turn on local school districts and charter schools, it is very, very bad policy. It's a slippery slope. It also, my other big concern about Common Core is that it will dictate curriculum. You've heard the old saying that, you teach to the test, and there's no question that if you have a federally mandated set of standards and a test or performance assessment that goes with those standards, it will ultimately dictate curriculum decisions, which are best made at the local level.
How do we measure how students are doing?
Oh,
how do we
there's
have
all kinds of tests.
a barometer, not only for all 50 states to see if the states...
There is such a test.
Okay.
There is such a test. It's called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP. Also nicknamed the nation's report card. It's been in effect for many, many years.
And you think that's fine?
Of course it is, because every state that takes funding for low-income students and schools under Title I, which is one of the many federal categorical programs, every state that takes funding for low-income students, including us, obviously Arizona, must administer the NAEP to a representative sampling of kids in the 4th and 8th grades in the subjects of reading and math every 2 years. And those test results are published for the whole world to see, so we can make all kinds of comparisons using that as the benchmark on a school-to-school, district-to-district, or even on a state-to-state basis.
I want to roll tape number 1 if we can, because at the last debate that we did, you were the only candidate, if my memory serves me, that felt that Superintendent of Public Instruction John Huppenthal should resign. You were the only one.
Yep, that's correct.
Tell me why.
Thank you all for being here.
Because public officials, I don't believe, should make comments like he's made, and especially not anonymously, cowardly, without being willing to put his name with those comments. Those comments were inherently divisive. Elected officials have to be careful about their language, their use of rhetoric. They should try to be unifying without ever abandoning or forsaking their core principles and beliefs. And I just think Superintendent Huppenthal crossed the line, and I think he should do the honorable thing, which is resign. I'd like to see...
You don't think he can lead the schools after this cloud?
I don't, and I don't support him to continuing in that position. I actually support his Republican primary opponent, Diane Douglas, but that's in large part, again, because Superintendent Huppenthal is one of the biggest advocates of Common Core in our state.
Okay, let's get back to the border briefly, and I'm trying to look for the video. This would be tape number 2. This is a crisis of the federal government's making, you believe?
Correct. Combination of the amnesty policies, lax border security, and lenient deportation procedures.
How much is rooted, honestly, in the drug wars going on in these countries, Nicaragua, El Salvador?
John,
that is not new. That's been going on for a long time.
That's not new. Our viewers should know that, because obviously the great majority of them, of course, are federal taxpayers. They should know that we sent $400 million in humanitarian aid, foreign aid, to those 3 Central American countries and Mexico last year. We also, federal taxpayers have been giving Mexico, on average, annually, somewhere between $250 million and $350 million, earmarked for the Mexican law enforcement entities for their training, technology,
and they're obviously allowing safe passage.
Oh, clearly.
There's no question about
it. They're failing to secure their southern border with Central America, and they are condoning, at a minimum, the human trafficking across the interior, the length of Mexico, and then into our country, across our unsecured southern border. And it is absolutely a threat to national security. 9/11, as much as our hearts might go out to people who are downtrodden or who are living in poverty or crime in basically third world countries, if I can put it that way, as much as our heart might go out to them, 9/11 changed everything with respect to how we must view our border. Our border must be secure, we must know who's in our country, and we must know who's coming and going.
And we don't.
We don't, clearly.
We're back with Frank Riggs, Republican candidate for governor. When we come back, we're going to talk about his priorities in office, what he would want to accomplish, and whether he thinks he has a chance in this race. Back in a minute on Newsmaker Sunday. Back with Frank Riggs. He is running for the Arizona nomination for governor in Arizona.
That would be the Republican nomination.
What did I
you said
say?
The Arizona nomination.
Yeah, the nomination for Arizona governor on the Republican side, however you want to phrase it. Good to see you. Okay, we got through a lot of ground in the first part of the program. People have written you off. They're like, who is this Riggs guy? I don't know anything about him. You know, you've heard all this stuff.
Actually, what I'm hearing is fantastic feedback from the grassroots. And, you know, the hard thing to project or predict will be voter turnout, because actually, of course, people can begin voting by mail at the end of this month, but the actual election is August 26th. So it's hard to project the turnout. But if the turnout is really driven by those people who are most passionate, most enthusiastic, most involved with the Republican Party, I think I've got a great chance.
Okay, so
winning the
lay it out
nomination.
for our viewers. A vote for Frank Riggs is a vote for what compared to the other 6 or 7 who are in this thing?
It's a vote for the person who has the deepest, most proven record of leadership, including my service in Congress. Someone who is absolutely vetted, is very experienced in the political arena. I believe, even though I want to reduce our state's dependency on the federal government, it would be a good thing for Arizona's next governor to have served successfully in Congress, know how to get things done back there, considering the fact that 40% of our state budget is federal aid, and so many million acres of Arizona land is under federal government dominion and control. But I am really the complete package, I'd like to believe. I'm the only veteran in the race. I'm the only one with law enforcement experience. I'm the only one that has served in Congress, the highest legislative body in our office, and I think with distinction.
What
as
about
a
private
reformer
sector?
And leader. I've got substantial private sector
And that had to do with
experience.
education and
Yes, it did.
and charter schools.
I helped to start and build, as the CEO, the largest nonprofit corporation, a community development financial institution dedicated to helping public charter schools acquire and finance their facilities and helping them with their financing needs. I also helped here in Arizona start a statewide online charter school that offers an accredited curriculum to homeschooling families. So I'm proud of what I've done in the private sector.
When teachers or whomever it might be think that charter schools are an assault on public education.
They shouldn't think that way.
Oh, tell me why.
Charter schools are public choice schools. No child is ever assigned to attend a charter school. They're only there because their parent or the responsible adult in their life has chosen that particular school and their educational model as the best and most appropriate education for their child. Charter school, I can understand why charter schools threaten district public schools or government-run schools, and that is because they are introducing the market principles of competition and choice into K-12 education at scale now and giving parents more choice, which is a very good thing, because the only way to ensure accountability in K-12 public education over the long term is to maximize parental school choice and to empower and entrust parents as the first and most important teacher and as the consumer of K-12
Are the
education.
schools in Arizona funded appropriately?
Well, that's a very good question. After public safety, K-12 education is my highest priority. And I would like to increase funding for K-12 education once we fix the budget mess and put state government on sound financial footing. But I wouldn't spend $350 million plus to implement Common Core. I'd rather spend that money to attract and retain the most dedicated, talented educators, both school leaders and principals. And if we're really serious, John, about improving test scores, then we've got to focus intensive resources on those segments of the student population that tend to bring test scores down when they're aggregated.
We're talking the
averaged.
border state issue. Right?
Yeah, we're talking about low-income students or Title I schools that serve predominantly low-income student populations. We're talking about students that have special needs and educational disabilities, and we're certainly in Arizona, a border state, talking about students with limited English proficiency.
How do you feel about all-day kindergarten?
In a perfect world, I'd love to do it. I don't think it's affordable now, and I don't think it's going to be affordable in the foreseeable future.
Let me show tape number 4. This is video of Child Protective Services, which is now a whole new agency created by Governor Brewer. Department of Child Safety, I believe it's called now. The new head of that agency, who's been a guest on Newsmaker Sunday, do you think, and he told me that he felt that the funding, he was comfortable with the funding for year 1. He's worried that with a new administration, with a new governor, new legislature, that funding may be slashed and kids would again be at risk. He feels that they've got what they need now to do the job.
Well, obviously, I'm a former police officer. I've investigated crimes against children. My wife, Kathy, of 34 years, native daughter, born in Tucson, also former police officer, which is how we met, specialized in crimes against children as a police detective. That was all done on the local level. And quite frankly, I don't agree with creating a new cabinet-level agency for Child Protective Services. I think that's a responsibility that should be transferred, along with sufficient funding, to local government to ensure better coordination between families, schools, which have a reporting
city
responsibility,
government doing
social
this?
services, and law enforcement, city and county, absolutely, with oversight by the state as the fiscal agency.
If cities are strapped, though, then where do they come up with the money for this?
Well, the state funding would be driven down to the local level. So I'm not
and then
talking
let
about
them
pulling.
control it.
Of course, because that's where those decisions, that's where government works best, and that's where those decisions should be made if we really want to ensure cooperation between families in distress, children at risk, social services, and the schools, and then in the most severe cases of abuse and neglect with local law enforcement as well.
The time in Washington, what did you learn?
That's a good question. When everything's said and done, to stand on principle, call them as I see them, let the chips fall where they may, not worry about the political consequences. I also learned how to work in a collaborative, bipartisan fashion. When I served in Congress, we were able to pass the balanced budget. When I left Congress in 1998 to keep my term limits commitment, the federal budget was balanced and generate surpluses for 4 consecutive years thereafter. I mentioned earlier, we fundamentally reformed welfare. So I learned that most people who strive for elective office, serve in elective office, are very principled. They want to do the right thing. A lot of times, though, they get caught up in the desire to be reelected, and
that's a poison in Washington.
That's a poison in Washington. There's no question about it. That I'm proud of the fact that I walked away. I had a little added inducement. Our children were young at the time, and I just finally concluded I was missing too many ball games and ballet recitals. But I also have learned that career politics and careerist politicians, I think, are corrosive to our democracy and building trust. And in our country, in our constitutional republic and our participatory democracy, there's a very fine line between the healthy skepticism that we inherited from our forefathers and corrosive cynicism, which results in apathy and undermines public trust.
Quickly, before we take break, you've traveled around and you must have done 40 debates with your compatriots in this race.
I wouldn't call them debates, though.
Okay, forums okay. Sizing them up, if you didn't win, who would you like to see win?
Well, I fully intend to win, and I hope to be able to unite them behind me.
But let's suppose that,
honestly,
doesn't
John,
happen. Is there one that stands out for you?
No, there is not. And I say that with due respect, but the fact of the matter is you've got some wealthy candidates, one who's decided that she'll stop, has never held elective office, not one day, but has decided that she'll start at the top. You have another so-called wealthy or establishment candidate who has never held legislative office, never had to cast a single tough vote. You mentioned earlier, my very first votes were on the first Persian Gulf War resolutions, and my last votes as a member of Congress were on the articles
I got to
of
take a
impeachment
break.
against
So
Bill
no
Clinton.
answer on this one. You're not going to answer it.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Back with Frank Riggs on Newsmaker Sunday right after this. Okay, back. Final moments of Frank Riggs. He was running for governor of Arizona on the Republican side. I asked you why you think you've got a chance, because a lot of people have written you off.
Well, timing is everything in life, especially in politics. And I think things are breaking our way. Because this isn't my first rodeo, I can sense that. Just this week, I received a very important and I think influential endorsement from former state senator and Senate President Russell Pierce. Very, very proud to have his support.
I guess in a Republican primary, that can be a double-edged sword, though, too.
Oh, he is an extraordinary public servant. He's served the people of Arizona well. Russell and I have a bond because we've both worn the badge. We're part of the law enforcement fraternity. Today, a conservative state senator, a really conservative icon, Judy Burgess from the west side of town, her LD22 and her Sun City West base endorsed me. So I really think the momentum is building. And again, I'm not blowing smoke here. I think I've got a pretty good gut feel for that, having been in by far of any of the candidates, by far the toughest election.
We've only got about 45 seconds left. What is job one in Arizona in your view?
Job one is dealing with our looming fiscal cliff, fixing the budget mess, getting our economy growing again. But the other part of that is absolutely public safety and doing our part to secure the border, to protect Arizona citizens, and in the process, I hope, restore the partnership with Mexico, which we can't have until they really become our ally and take responsibility for helping to secure their side of the 2,000-mile international border that we share.
Frank Riggs, appreciate your time. Best of luck.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
Enjoyed spending some time with you and your family, and your wife, Kathy, enjoyed that a couple of weeks ago.
You're always welcome at the Riggs Casa.
Appreciate it. Good to see you, and we'll see you next week on Newsmaker Sunday.